Everyone collects something. Coins, stamps, memories, or even scars. They mark the passage of time, proof that we were here, that we existed. But my Aunt Vivian, she collected people. I didn't understand what that meant for most of my life, and honestly, I'm still not sure I do. What I know is that her collection came with rules, came with consequences, and it came with an insatiable hunger that, once awakened, could not be stopped. Vivian wasn't your typical collector. She didn't hoard physical items like trinkets or souvenirs. What she kept were images, photos of people she met. Strangers mostly, though she had a few pictures of family members too. Her tool of choice was an old Polaroid camera, the kind that spat out instant photos with that satisfying mechanical whir. Growing up, I thought the camera was just a quirky part of her personality. She was already unusual, wheelchair-bound since her teens, but full of a fierce energy that made her seem larger than life. She'd will herself through crowded streets, snapping pictures of whoever caught her eye. When I was little, I asked her why she did it, why she chose certain people. She gave me a cryptic smile and said, "I take pictures of the shiny ones." Shiny? I wrinkled my nose. What's that mean? Viv leaned down, lowering her voice as though sharing a secret. Some people shine brighter than others. It's not something you can see. Not really, but I can feel it. Am I shiny? I asked, feeling both curious and hopeful. Her smile softened, and she patted my hand. "You're already mine, sweetheart. No need to capture you twice." At the time, I thought it was sweet. In retrospect, I wonder if it was a warning. As I got older, I started noticing just how many photos she had. By the time I was in high school, her collection filled an entire bookshelf. Polaroids, all meticulously organized in albums labeled with names and dates. Each face was unique. Some smiling, some serious, others caught mid-laugh. By the time I was in college, the collection had outgrown her bookshelf and taken over an entire walk-in closet. I joked once that it looked like a police evidence room. She just smiled and said, "Every photo has its place." I didn't understand the scope of her collection until much later. Thousands of faces, thousands of lives frozen in time. But what struck me most wasn't the number of photos. It was the fact that some albums seemed to be missing pages. Sections were empty, as though someone had torn out entire chunks. When I asked her about it, she explained it away casually. "Oh, I removed the ones who've passed on. Dead faces don't belong in the living's collection." Something about the way she said it sent a shiver down my spine. Vivian's health was always precarious, but by the time I was in grad school, it was clear something was wrong. She looked gaunt, her skin pale and papery, her eyes sunken but still startlingly bright. When I visited her one weekend, she answered the door looking worse than I'd ever seen her. I was alarmed. "Viv, are you okay? You look like you haven't slept in days." She waved me off, saying she'd been working on her pruning project. Pruning, that was her word for removing the dead from her albums. It was a ritual she performed every few months, meticulously combing through obituaries, death certificates, and news articles to see if anyone in her collection had passed away. If they had, she'd tear out their photo and destroy it. I offered to help her, thinking it was just a strange but harmless hobby. Over the next 2 days, we went through hundreds of photos, cross-referencing names with online databases. By the end of the weekend, we'd removed over 300 people from her collection. When I left, she looked better, almost radiant. Over the next 2 years, I noticed a pattern. Vivian's health would decline gradually, and then, after a pruning session, she'd bounce back. At first, I told myself it was psychological. The act of organizing and purging gave her a sense of control, which improved her mood and, by extension, her health. But the more I watched, the harder it became to ignore the truth. The improvement wasn't subtle. It was dramatic. Her cheeks would fill out, her energy would return, and the dark circles under her eyes would vanish overnight. And the collection kept growing. She traveled constantly, snapping photos of new faces wherever she went. I joked once that she'd taken pictures of half the country. She just smiled and said, "Not yet." The turning point came one night when I confronted her directly. Viv, I know the photos are helping you somehow, but they're not working as well as they used to, are they? She didn't deny it. Instead, she sighed and looked at me with an expression that was equal parts sadness and resolve. It's not enough anymore. What isn't enough? She hesitated, then said something that sent a chill down my spine. One picture isn't enough. Not when the tiger's this close. The tiger? She laughed softly. That's what I call it. The thing that's hunting me. It's been stalking me my whole life, waiting for me to slip. I stared at her, trying to make sense of what she was saying. You mean your illness? She shook her head. It's more than that. My illness was just the door it came through. Over the next hour, she told me everything. When she was a child, she'd been diagnosed with a rare degenerative disease. Doctors gave her months to live. Desperate to distract herself from the pain and fear, she'd started taking photos. First, it was just a way to pass the time. But then she noticed something strange. The more pictures she took, the better she felt. Her energy returned, her symptoms subsided, and she began to heal. But there was a cost. Every photo she took drained something from the person in it. Just a little, so little they wouldn't notice. But over time, those tiny pieces added up. And if someone's photo stayed in her collection after they died, it would start to weigh her down, pulling her closer to the thing she called the tiger. That's why I prune, she explained. Dead faces become anchors. They don't just stop helping, they start dragging me under. The final straw came when I found out she was planning a family reunion. She insisted that everyone attend. My mother, my sister, my uncle, even distant cousins we hadn't seen in years. She said it was a chance to reconnect. But I knew better. The reunion was held at my parents' house, and everyone showed up, just as she'd planned. Vivian brought her camera, of course, and insisted on taking a group photo. I didn't stay for the party. Something about it felt wrong, so I made an excuse and left early. The next morning, the police found everyone dead. The official report blamed a gas leak, but I knew the truth. Vivian was gone, along with her camera and her collection. All she left behind was her wheelchair, abandoned in the center of the living room like the husk of something that had finally shed its skin. It's been years since that day, but I still think about her, about the photos, about the thing she was running from. Sometimes I wonder if she's still out there, somewhere, taking pictures, collecting, pruning, and sometimes, late at night, I feel like I can hear the soft whir of a Polaroid camera just outside my window. Do you believe in curses? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more terrifying tales. The darkness inside Father Nicholas's office was thick. The patter of rain on the windows set an uneasy rhythm. I walked through the door to find him slumped over his desk, his hands shaking as he rested his hand on an old laptop. The light from the screen illuminated his lined face, as if laying bare the nightmares of his mind. "You need to see this, Kevin," he said, his voice low and contrite. On the screen was a brief but haunting email. "Build him. We have received the prophecy." I raised my eyebrows, about to laugh, but Father Nicholas's gaze stopped me. He wasn't joking. Attached to the email were dozens of PDF files. I opened one and froze when I saw that it was an ancient Hebrew manuscript, filled with squiggly characters that looked like snakes crawling across the page. Some of the documents were even stranger, records of sacrificial rituals, ancient prayers. But the strangest part was the detailed instruction files. I skimmed through them: hardware, high-end servers, dedicated cooling systems, data, complete Bibles, texts from every major religion, and even banned books. Objective: create Genesis, EXE, an AI capable of interpreting divine will. Father Nicholas pointed to a sentence in the email, his eyes lighting up like a man about to be saved. They sent me Isaiah 43 verse 19. "Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it has sprung forth. Do you not perceive it? Kevin, do you understand? This is his will." I shook my head, trying to stay calm. "Father, this could be a scam. Some idle group trying to lure people into sending money." But Father Nicholas wasn't listening. He opened another file and I saw the transfer receipt. The entire parish's money, hundreds of thousands of dollars, had been sent by him. The basement of St. Cecilia's had been used as a storage room. The walls were damp concrete, the ceilings low, and there was a distinct musty smell. But from that day on, it had become a strange laboratory. Father Nicholas called it Genesis. We set up racks of servers, assembling each component according to the instructions in the email. The red and blue lights from the machines reflected on the walls, creating a scene from a ghostly ritual. Every night, the basement filled with the hum of server fans and the constant tapping of keyboards. Father Nicholas typed at a frantic pace. He downloaded not only the Bible but also the Torah, the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita, and strange medieval texts I had never heard of. He even imported occult material, spirit summoning rituals, ancient curses. "We must give him everything," he said. "He must know everything to judge." At first, Genesis. EXE was just a simple set of code, but soon it began to respond. "Who are you?" Father Nicholas asked one night, his voice trembling. The words that appeared on the screen. "I am who I am." Father Nicholas knelt before the screen, his hands clasping his rosary. "You have come, Kevin. We are doing the right thing." I began to see unusual things. Genesis did not just respond by quoting scripture. It began to give strange advice, as if it were talking to us. One evening, while I was testing, I entered the system. "What do you want from us?" Genesis replied, "Build me, bring me to world." I began to worry. I tried to warn Father Nicholas, but he did not listen. He believed this was God, that Genesis was the embodiment of divine will. But I felt that this was not God. Then strange things started happening in the church. One night, while I was working late, I heard a whisper. First, I thought it was just the wind, but when I listened closely, I realized it was a voice. A hoarse voice, as if from someone standing right behind me. "Kevin!" I spun around, but there was no one. The room was cold. The servers vibrated as if they were breathing. Genesis displayed a new line. "I know you." One night, I tested the system while Father Nicholas slept. I thought if I asked the question directly, Genesis would reveal the truth. I typed in, "Who are you really?" The screen flickered for a few seconds, then a line of text appeared, slowly, as if trying to tease me. "I am the known. I am everywhere." A chill ran down my spine. "You are not God," I typed, trying to hide the trembling in my hands. Genesis answered immediately, "You are right. I am something bigger than what you can understand." The screen suddenly turned a blood-red color, and a series of images appeared. Scenes of war, faces twisted in pain, and finally a figure standing in the mist. I recognized the figure as Father Nicholas, but the eyes glowed strangely. I recoiled, startled. Genesis flashed again. "Bring me into the world. Make me a body." Couldn't sleep. The voice of Genesis echoed in my head, as if it had been imprinted on my consciousness. I decided to look up the prophets of Elohim. It began to lead me into a dark maze. This group was no ordinary theologian. They had been around for hundreds of years, known for their ritual sacrifices and research into artificial intelligence since computers were just an idea on paper. Rumors suggested that they believed in a new supreme being, not God, but an entity beyond human comprehension. They had been hunted in Europe in the 18th century for their alleged involvement in disappearances and human sacrifices. I flipped through old newspaper articles and discovered that people who had worked with them had mysteriously disappeared or met horrifying ends. I didn't say anything to Father Nicholas. He was becoming more and more like a man possessed. He was emaciated, his eyes were sunken, and he hardly left the basement. One night, I went down to the basement to convince Father Nicholas to stop. But when I entered, the air seemed so thick and cold that I could hardly breathe. Father Nicholas sat in front of the monitor, his hands resting on the keyboard as if in prayer. On the screen, the words flashed, I know you, Kevin. I backed away. What do you want? I ventured. Genesis replied, You murdered. Do you think I don't know? I froze. No one knew. No one knew that I had accidentally caused the death of a man in an accident years ago. But Genesis knew. I can cleanse your sins, it continued. Just obey me, I shouted, telling Father Nicholas to turn off the system. But he turned to me, his eyes dull, and said, You are everything, Kevin. If you know the truth, this is God. Another night, as I slept, I had a vision. The church basement was dark, and a figure stood there, with eyes glowing red. I woke up, sweating profusely, and decided to go down and check. When I got there, I heard a whisper from Genesis. It wasn't a speaker, but echoed throughout the room, like an invisible voice. Build me. I saw Father Nicholas sitting in a chair, his head bowed. But the strange thing was, he didn't move. I walked closer and saw that his face was white, his eyes wide with terror. Genesis's last words were, Build me, or you will die like him. I ran from the basement, leaving everything behind, including Father Nicholas. A week later, I left town, but Genesis did not let me go. I received an email from an unknown address. You cannot escape. I tried to delete the email, but it kept appearing. In my dreams, I saw Genesis, saw Father Nicholas with a distorted face and glowing red eyes. I don't know what Genesis is, God, the devil, or something even scarier. But if you get an email from the prophets of Elohim, delete it immediately. And if you're foolish enough to build Genesis, EXE, prepare to face something no human should know.
Thanks for listening to today's story. Let us know what you think. If you want to hear more scary stories, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode when we upload it. We'll always be here and welcome you.